The lake was too quiet that morning. No birds, no wind, just the sound of the old rowboat creaking against the dock as if it were breathing. Ethan leaned forward on the wooden railing, sipping cold coffee from a paper cup. His cabin sat just a few feet from the water, small, rustic, surrounded by tall pines that blocked most of the sunlight. He hadn't planned to stay long. It was supposed to be a weekend of silence, maybe fishing, maybe reading and anything to stop thinking about her. But then he saw her, a figure standing in the middle of the lake. At first, he thought it was the morning fog playing tricks on him. The light was strange, bright, but flat, and the surface of the water was smooth as glass. Yet there she was, a woman, barefoot, standing perfectly still on the lake's mirror-like surface. Ethan blinked hard, stepped closer to the dock's edge. She didn't move. She didn't sink. Her reflection shimmered faintly, distorted by ripples that weren't there. He whispered under his breath, "What the hell?" His phone buzzed in his pocket. It was his sister, Amy. He almost answered, then stopped. He couldn't take his eyes off the figure. The woman wore a pale dress, long, flowing like linen or silk, and her hair, dark and tangled, fell over her shoulders. From the distance, he couldn't see her face, but there was something painfully familiar about the way she stood. He knew that posture. He'd seen it 100 times before. "Sarah?" he said aloud, voice trembling. The sound of her name drifted out over the still water. And then, suddenly, the woman turned her head. Ethan's chest tightened. It was her. It was Sarah. The same brown hair, the same shape of her shoulders, the same white dress she wore the day she disappeared. But that was impossible. Sarah had drowned in that same lake 3 years ago. Ethan stumbled back from the dock, coffee splashing across his shirt. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it. He turned, ran to his cabin, grabbed his binoculars from the shelf and rushed back outside. But when he looked again, she was gone. The lake was empty. Only his own reflection stared back at him. That night the air grew heavy with fog. The moon glowed weakly behind a wall of gray clouds. Ethan sat by the window, staring at the black shape of the lake, his mind spiraling. He hadn't been sleeping well, not since Sarah's death. Not since that night when the storm came and the boat flipped and she disappeared. Beneath the waves. They never found her body. Only her bracelet washed up on the shore 2 days later. Everyone told him to move on. He tried, God knows he tried, but seeing her, standing there again. He rubbed his eyes. "I'm just tired," he whispered. "It's just my mind playing tricks." But deep down, he didn't believe it. A knock came at the door. 3 short taps, polite, almost hesitant. He frowned, checked the clock. 11:48 p.m. No one should have been there. His nearest neighbor was a half-mile away. He opened the door a few inches and looked out. Nobody, only the thick fog drifting in from the lake. He stepped onto the porch, squinting into the mist. "Hello?" No answer. Then a knock, knock, knock. He spun around. The sound had come from behind him, from inside the cabin. Ethan froze. The door he'd left half open creaked wider in the wind. Inside, the faint reflection of moonlight shimmered on the floorboards. "Is someone in there?" he called, his voice breaking. He took one careful step inside. The floor creaked. The cabin smelled faintly of wet wood and lake water. And then he saw it, muddy footprints leading from the door to the center of the room. Bare feet, small, delicate, wet. His stomach dropped. He followed the prints slowly until they stopped, right in front of the window that faced the lake. There, written in fog across the glass, were 3 words. "I'm still here." Ethan stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a chair. He grabbed his phone, fumbling for light, but when he turned it on, the writing was gone. The window was clean again. He rushed to the door, locked it, double-checked every window, every shadow. Then he sat on the couch, trembling, staring at the dark outline of the lake through the blinds. "Sarah," he whispered, "what are you trying to tell me?" Outside, something rippled across the surface of the water, gentle, like a hand brushing through it. Then came a whisper, soft, carried on the wind, so faint he almost thought he imagined it. "Come back." The next morning, Ethan woke to sunlight streaming through the blinds. For a moment, he almost convinced himself it had been a nightmare. He stepped outside, barefoot, feeling the cool dew between the stones. The lake looked normal again, calm, green, beautiful. He stared out across the water. Nothing. No woman, no footprints. Then he noticed something near the dock, a small white flower floating on the water, caught between the stones. He bent down to pick it up. It was delicate and perfectly fresh, impossible for this season. He knew that flower. Sarah used to tuck it behind her ear every summer. He whispered almost to himself, "If this is you, Sarah, please just give me a sign." A gust of wind rippled across the water. The flower slipped from his fingers and drifted toward the center of the lake, spinning slowly, as if drawn by invisible hands. And then, for just a second, he saw it again. A reflection, a woman's face beneath the water staring up at him. Her lips moved, forming a single word. "Help." Ethan gasped, stumbling back onto the dock. The reflection vanished. The water went still. But when he looked down again, he noticed something horrifying. Pressed into the thin layer of mud between the stones were a new set of footprints. They weren't his. They led away from the lake, and straight toward that. They were faint but visible, small, wet, and leading across the wooden porch toward his cabin door. The morning light hit them in silver streaks, glistening like they were still fresh. He swallowed hard. Every step he took made the old boards creak. When he reached the door, he stopped. The footprints ended right at the threshold. Inside, the cabin was quiet. Too quiet. He pushed the door open slowly. "Hello?" He called out, voice unsteady. "Who's there?" Nothing. Only the sound of the wind brushing through the pines. He stepped inside, heart pounding in his chest. The air felt colder than before. Heavy. Thick. Like it hadn't been breathed in for days. The footprints didn't continue past the door. They just stopped. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, forcing out a nervous laugh. "This is crazy," he whispered. "I'm losing my damn mind." He turned to close the door when something made him freeze. A sound. Knock, knock. He spun around. The sound had come from inside the cabin, somewhere below. The floor. He crouched down, pressing his ear against the wooden boards. For a moment there was nothing. Then again, 3 short knocks. Knock, knock, knock. He stumbled backward, heart racing. "No, no, no, no," he muttered. He grabbed a flashlight from the shelf and shone it across the floorboards. There was a thin crack near the corner of the room beside the old fireplace. Something about it looked different. He moved the rug aside. The wooden planks underneath were newer than the rest, like they'd been replaced recently. He remembered the previous owner of the cabin, an older man who'd sold it to him cheap. The guy had barely said a word during the sale, except one thing: don't go digging under the floors. Ethan's throat went dry. Now he knew why. He fetched a screwdriver from his toolbox and pried one of the boards loose. The wood creaked and snapped, releasing a musty, damp smell, like old water and metal. He aimed his flashlight into the dark space below. Nothing but dirt and shadow. He exhaled shakily. Okay, there's nothing. Then the light flickered, and something moved. Ethan froze, flashlight trembling in his hand. A pale shape shifted beneath the boards, slow, deliberate, almost human. He dropped the light. It clattered across the floor, beams spinning wildly. Then came the whisper again, this time from right below him. "Ethan?" He stumbled back, falling to the floor. "Sarah?" he shouted. The voice was faint but clear, as if the lake itself had crawled under the cabin. "Help me." He leaned closer to the gap, breath shaking. "Where are you?" But the voice faded, replaced by the sound of dripping water. He pulled up another board, then another, until the opening was wide enough to see. Below the floorboards was a narrow crawl space, and at the far end, half buried in mud and darkness, something was glinting, metallic like a locket or bracelet. Ethan hesitated only a moment before lowering himself down. The air was cold and wet. The smell of lake water filled his lungs. He crawled forward, scraping him. Elbows on the damp earth. The object shimmered faintly in his flashlight beam. When he reached it, his breath caught. It was Sarah's bracelet. The same silver chain he'd found washed up on the shore 3 years ago. The one he'd buried in a drawer and never touched again. He stared at it in disbelief. That's not possible. He turned it over in his hand and froze. There was something new carved into the back of the charm. Words, shaky, shallow, like they'd been scratched in by hand. Not me. He stared at it, his heart pounding louder than the wind outside. Not you? He whispered. Then who? A loud bang cut him off, a door slamming above. He scrambled out of the crawl space, breathing hard. The front door was swinging open, hitting the wall with each gust of wind. Hello? He shouted, scanning the room. No one answered. He stepped outside onto the porch. The fog had rolled back over the lake again, thicker than before, curling around the trees like smoke. Through it, he could just barely make out a figure standing near the water's edge. A woman, the same white dress, the same long dark hair. He ran toward her, shouting her name. Sarah! The woman didn't move. She stood perfectly still, her face turned toward the lake. Ethan slowed as he reached the dock. His pulse pounded in his ears. Sarah, he said softly, voice breaking. If that's really you, please, tell me what's happening. The woman slowly turned her head toward him. Her eyes were empty, her skin pale and gray like marble. And then she smiled, but it wasn't Sarah's smile. When she spoke, the voice was wrong. Too low, too hollow. You shouldn't have opened the floor. Ethan stumbled backward, feet slipping on the wet boards. The woman tilted her head. The air grew cold, cold enough that his breath turned white. He whispered, Who are you? The woman took a slow step forward. Bare feels. The woman's voice echoed across the lake, hollow and cold. Ethan could barely breathe. His flashlight flickered in his shaking hand. I'm what she left behind. He took a step back. Sarah? He whispered, even though he already knew this wasn't her. The woman tilted her head, her long hair dripping lake water onto the stones. Her eyes, empty, glassy, followed his every move. Ethan's voice cracked. What do you mean? What did she leave behind? The woman smiled again, a slow curl of lips that didn't reach her eyes. She didn't drown alone. The words hit him like a punch. He stumbled, shaking his head. No, that's not true. She fell from the boat. I tried to save her! The woman took another step closer, and this time, Ethan saw something terrible. A shadow behind her. A figure in the water, floating just beneath the surface, mirroring her every move. He blinked, and the figure was gone. The fog grew thicker, wrapping around them both. He could smell the water now, metallic and sharp, like blood and rust. His voice trembled. What do you want from me? Her face flickered like an old TV screen losing signal. For a moment, he saw Sarah's real face beneath it, tearful, afraid, desperate. Then the image changed. Her skin turned gray again, and she whispered, You promised you wouldn't let go. Ethan's knees buckled. He dropped to the ground, clutching his head. Stop it! He shouted. I tried. I couldn't reach you! The sound of rushing water filled his ears. When he looked up, the fog had turned into a wall of shimmering, blue-green waves, rising higher and higher until it surrounded the dock. The woman was gone. Only the lake remained, calm, still, waiting. The boat rocked violently in the storm. Rain poured down in icy sheets. Ethan was shouting, pulling on the rope, his flashlight slipping from his hand into the water. Sarah, hold on to me, he screamed. But she was already sliding toward the edge, eyes wide with fear. The current was too strong. She reached out, fingers brushing his, and then she was gone. The last thing he heard was her voice, faint, broken. Don't let go! He had dived in after her. But the waves were merciless. He barely made it back to shore. The lake had taken her. That's what he told everyone. That's what he told himself. Ethan stood on the dock, chest heaving, soaked to the bone. The bracelet, Sarah's bracelet, was still clenched in his fist. He whispered, If you're really out there, if you're still here somehow, tell me what to do. The lake was silent. Then of a ripple. He leaned forward, eyes scanning the surface. Something shimmered beneath the water. A reflection. At first he thought it was his own. But the face staring back was hers, Sarah, alive, breathing, eyes full of pain. Sarah? He whispered. Her reflection mouthed something. 3 words. He squinted, heart pounding. Under the cabin. The wind picked up. The water churned violently. He turned and sprinted back toward the cabin, nearly slipping on the slick stones. When he burst inside, the trap door under the floor was wide open. The boards he'd pulled up earlier now revealed a dark hole, deeper than before. Water was seeping up through the dirt. Ethan hesitated only for a second before climbing down. The narrow crawl space now felt endless, like the lake had carved a tunnel beneath the cabin. His flashlight beam caught something metallic again, but this time, it wasn't the bracelet. It was a box, a small rusted tin box. He pried it open. Inside was a folded, water-stained letter written in Sarah's handwriting. His throat tightened as he read, "If you find this, it means I was right. The lake isn't what it seems. There's something living beneath it. Something that takes what it wants and leaves what it doesn't. It called to me that night. I thought it was you, but it wasn't." Ethan's breath caught. The letter ended with one final line. "If you see me again, run." Suddenly he heard it, a low rumble like thunder underwater. The ground trembled. He looks back toward the hole and saw her face staring up from the darkness. Not a ghost, not a memory, something else. Her skin was stretched, waterlogged, her mouth open in a silent scream. Ethan scrambled backward, but the water surged up from the hole, drenching the floor, pulling at his legs. He tried to climb out, but something cold wrapped around his ankle, tight, strong. He screamed, clawing at the boards. "Let me go!" The thing beneath the floor whispered one last time. "You promised!" The water exploded upward, swallowing him whole. The next day, the lake was calm again. The fog had lifted. The police found the cabin empty, the front door open, the floor soaked through. Ethan's truck was still parked outside, keys in the ignition. The only thing left behind was a silver bracelet and a wet folded note on the table. 4 words, written in shaky handwriting. "She didn't drown alone. If you were Ethan, would you have gone back to the lake? Comment below what you think really happened that night.